Just giving it a bit of time for people to come and check in. But with the microphone on, I'm gonna talk washes once we actually get once we get into place. So anyway, with the screen up, I'm gonna at least put there. John, hi. How are you doing? The welcome. The my little display that says how many people watching now is on a little bit of a delay. So we're just starting to get to have people come in. Welcome, Dustins. well, welcome to your the first live stream. So anyway, I'm just as we're getting started. I just have the live chat frame active, having some people come in, say hi. The topic is of course let's talk washes, and we're going to be getting into that soon. You lost an airbrush part down a sink? Oh, sorry, John. So I assume that you got it back and it's intact. So all right, good. I have to admit, every once in a while, twice in the ownership of my airbrush, have I actually forgotten to clean it out, and one of those times was actually just 2 days ago, that I was doing something, and I was using primer in it, and anyway, for whatever reason, I came upstairs and I forgot to go back downstairs and clean it, violating one of my own cardinal rules, and wow, that was a bit of a mess to clean out. Now, fortunately, I discovered it on Tuesday morning, so I was able to sit down and completely clean the thing out, and not enough of the primer that was still in there had completely dried, so I managed to salvage it. But I was worried that I would have to get a new airbrush. All right, so according to this, we have about five people in. The welcome everyone. I am going to get in. I have something a little bit more in terms of washes, but I've got a couple of other things that I'm going to do just ahead of that. But probably at this point, if you've got any questions or any Q&A, the go ahead and put it out there, and I'll try and get it. At a certain point, if the chat gets going and keeps going, it's kind of hard to manage the questions. But I'll see what I can do, and but we'll try and do that. So actually, Dustin, that's a good idea. Now, John, what kind of airbrush are you using? Is it a siphon feed, or is it a gravity feed? And I'm assuming everybody can hear me. Anyway. And I also have. I think I'm going to do a little unboxing as well as this. This is a locomotive commission that came through my Patreon page, and so there are a pair of locomotives in here. Hey, Mike. Welcome. Okay. I hear you, John. The so you had. I would imagine you had to completely unscrew the trap. And hi, Vinny. Welcome. Vinny, I haven't made you a moderator yet. I really should. Hang on. Let's see if I can. All right, Vinny, you should now have a wrench. Just making sure that we have it. We're going to talk all things wash in a few minutes. So how's? Hey, Roy, welcome. The good to see you. And just welcome to everyone. I like it. I really like it when the community comes in. I'm glad that everybody's participating, and you've, as someone who I consider myself an outsider to model railroading, that you've welcomed me in what I have to offer. So thank you very much for tuning in. So I've got a couple of options on the table. I figure I may as well. Yes, Vinny is a Smurf. He's got the nice blue wrench beside him. So, but that's great. Oh yes, and my son is right here. So he heard the word Smurf. He's too young to know what a Smurf is, but anyway. The welcome from Cape Breton. Whereabouts in Cape Breton? My father was born in New Waterford and raised in Sydney. So, and this is a Cape Breton face. That's where my genetics are from. I was born here in Calgary, but my family is from that ways east, at least the way that I'm currently sitting. That way south, and so Vinny is that way, almost directly that way. But speaking of which, the weather is considerably nicer than when I had. The weather's considerably nicer here than it was when I did my last live stream. How's the weather? Is spring actually showing up, or is it more that is everything? Is spring actually showing up for everybody? Anyway, let me know, and I'm gonna get us started. So the welcome for today, we're going to be dealing with all things washes. We towards the end of the show, the broadcast, I've got a box opening here that I'm going to be doing and some possible housekeeping and updating on things. Oh, summer has started in Arizona. The very good. So I actually saw a couple blades of green grass around here when all the snow finally went away. So anyway, all right. So without further ado, welcome to JC's Riptrack. I'm doing a special on let's talk washes. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of an opening sequence coming up on JC's Riptrack. All right, welcome everybody. For tonight's live stream, I'm just going to bring the chat frame back up, and everybody gets to come in. Now, today again, we're going to be talking about washes. I even have a little bit of a presentation that we're going to be doing. And how many of you out there have tried using washes of any stripe? It doesn't matter what it's made of, but using washes on your models. And I'd be curious. Just put it over into chat, and just let me know the types of washes that you use. Today we're going to be covering about 4 different broad varieties of washes that we use, both pre-made and homemade types. Couple tips on if you want to try and make your own. And hopefully we can get there. Yes, Roy, scenery washes count on scenery. I do washes on my ballast from time to time, and the module that I recently did, recently, it's almost 2 years old now, for my club, I actually used an ink wash on my ballast. So yes. The watered down white paint, Dustin. Yep, that counts. That, like, anything basically watered down counts as a wash. In fact, let's see if I can actually let's bring this up, because I actually have a bit of the definition of a wash, and we can kind of keep going. I've got the chat window attached to this, but in terms of anything that is basically a thin down paint of something counts as a wash. And the pre-made stuff is basically that's all it is. So, Mike, you're using Create FX by Testers, Tamiya Panaline, the India Ink alcohol mix, all good. In fact, I happen to have some India Ink here. My little mini cam is down here. Actually, I think I can actually. Let's see if I can bring that up. So there's the India ink that I happen to have. Oil paints, India ink. Okay. I mean a lot of these. Now, Dustin, let's see. Your weathering wash on a building. It was white paint. Was it oil or was it acrylic wash when you did it on a building? I recently did it was kind of like a slurry, and it was an oil paint. Roy, terpenoid is generally a term for any sort of mineral spirit thinner. Sometimes it's called white spirit. Sometimes it's called, like the stuff that I normally use is called taltine, and that's one possibly. So, okay, so Dustin, you used acrylic for the brick and mortar. I recently used an oil, and it worked quite well. So, I mean, there is a whole lot of different ways that you can actually get at doing a wash. Yes, Roy, terpenoid is paint thinner. So everybody's typing quickly. I wouldn't worry too much about whether or not you can spell at this point, unless you happen to have. If you're on a phone and autocorrect, but autocorrect does some really, really weird things, especially if you're using modeling terms. Anyway, so the basics of a wash, and I'm using a really broad definition here, is that a wash is simply a thin solution, and it contains color pigments, which usually tend to be powder, or dyes, which tend to be liquid. I mean, that's a really broad definition. There's a whole lot more to the chemistry, but that's what a wash is. But really, what a wash does is probably the more important thing, because when you use a wash, the idea is that it works with the shape and the surface of the model that you're working on. That oddly enough, the rougher the surface is, the more it will respond to a wash. And the idea is that it brings out detail in a way that's natural to the shape of the model. And frankly, when you're trying to get a realistic result, the washes can be a very quick way to do it. For example, the India Ink isopropyl alcohol mix, which is pretty common amongst model railroaders. Ralph Renzetti refers to it as little old school. It is, but it still works. And that's, your basic, you're basically using India ink, just like what you see here. And the India ink itself, when mixed with alcohol, because it is low surface tension, it gets to where it needs to go. So I'm just lining some other things, but the one thing about doing a wash is that it can really be a time saver, and especially if you're working with factory painted models. Like, even from where I'm coming from as a miniature painter, it really would save time in terms of the types of blending and highlights that one would do in terms of trying to get a realistic skin tones and things like that. Washes are extremely useful. So there's a Hunterline brand now. That's a brand I'm not familiar with, Mike. So I'm hoping I'm catching everybody's comments as they come through. One thing that I have learned to do with these particular live streams is I'm going to try and make sure that there's a "what did I miss" either in the comment section down below as they attach, once this is done, if I happen to miss anything, and I'll try and answer it after that, or in the community posts from my channel is a good way to do that. So anyway, so the base in terms of what a wash does, the whole idea is that it draws into the cracks and crevices. And what it does, it creates an artificial sense of size in terms of the way a light hits a building or something like that. Because when you, like, for example, just right out the window here, you can't necessarily see it all that well, is the side of my neighbor's house, and it's all one color. It's dark. It's a dark blue, and yet it looks like there's these dark lines because it's ribbed vinyl, and there's some dust on it as well. And those color variations, washes help create that illusion. And washes are effectively a type of illusion. Dustin, has anybody used a wash for doing an N-scale track tie weathering? Yes. You can do a wash. In fact, I have. Although sometimes you do have to paint a few things before you apply the wash. Um, yes, Mike, Trains and Such does have the hunter line stains. I just haven't managed to acquire them yet. Um, I've got a whole list of things. The beauty about something like this, especially with the community, is there's a wide breadth of experience. I mean, I'm simply sharing with what I've learned, but at the same time, I also learn as much through this as I hope you're learning from me. So this exchange of information is great. So write that down. I'm gonna the hunter line washes. Um, I'm going to make sure that we work that. Okay, Reineck saying yes. I'm actually very familiar with the Army Painter Quick Shade, both their bottle and their cans. Their cans are more of a polyurethane type, and you take a miniature and you dip it in and shake it off and then let it dry. But yes, I'm familiar with the Army Painter stuff. They're good brand, good product. I was bringing up an array of different washes, and that's the one wash that I left downstairs. So yes, I have one Army Painter wash, but I also have some other Army Painter materials as well. So yes, Army Painter is certainly one of the brands to work with this. Um, so anyway, going back to the basics, the whole idea of a wash is that it actually is intended to bring out detail, and of course, when modelers started using it, all they really did was just take paint and thin it down when applying. I mean, these are painting techniques that you can even do on canvas to create kind of a wash effect. That all they did was just take paint or ink and just thin it down with whatever thinner they happen to have useful for the paint, be it water or be it water or be it some the mineral based thinners, and of course inks were there, and that's really where the ink and the India ink and the alcohol is came from. That's where it started, but people started working on their own concoctions. I mean that there was different ways to do it, experimenting. Of course, the India ink, the alcohol mix, but there's a number of different types. A more recent one that still uses ink is actually and I can actually show this here, is the India ink and Future. This mixed together, because this is basically clear acrylic medium, and if you mix the ink here, it thins it down enough. But this still allows it to kind of really suck into the cracks. Some people refer to it as magic wash, that if you take about a 50-50 mix of the Future Floor Cleaner and a couple drops of ink, that can actually create a really, really effective looking wash. Now, the drawback is it is really shiny when it dries, so you will have to then hit it with a matte coat. But that's an example of one of the homegrown recipes. The India ink alcohol that I've mentioned several times already, that is also a homegrown recipe. The and so are there any other particular recipes that you like to use? Because I mean, I'm going to be talking about personal, your homegrown recipes, but also, and now get that if they're family secrets or ones that you'd rather not share, that's fine. Because sometimes we have our own little mixtures that we like to work with, but oh, sorry, are you talking this bottle? This is Pledge with Future Floor Shine. It used to be simply called Future Floor Polish, and unfortunately, here let me just bring this up to I'm going to bring this up to a bigger screen. Where are we here? All right, let's do this as a bigger screen. All right, so there is the Future Floor Polish and the India ink, and this is Winsor Newton, the black ink. This is your basic wash, and it works very well. You can also choose a number of different colors. In fact, I've been thinking of doing an ink wash more specifically with. There are some inks at the local art store that are things like gray and white ink that I actually want to see how they work in terms of fading and the like. Yeah, unfortunately, the one thing about John, you're right about the future floor polish. This bottle is almost 10 years old, and I still have like that much of it left. You basically you buy one bottle and you're set for life. But it's different names depending upon the country that you're in. Like I think it's called Johnson's Clear in some places. There is actually a website, and I'll link it to below. It's called The Complete Future, and it really is a complete description of all the different things that you can do with Future Floor Polish beyond washes. It's like you can do it for the ceiling canopies. You can use it for all kinds of different things. But yeah, I'm gonna get into some commercially made stuff. So anyway, there are a lot of different homegrown recipes. We can kind of maybe if you're comfortable with it, share your homegrown recipes down below so you get the credit for it, and so that other people can see that, and but we're gonna talk a little bit more broadly in terms of the different homegrown recipes. The types of washes I'm going to be talking about here. Of course, the ones that we're most familiar with are the top two: acrylic and oil or enamel-based washes. I use the term oil and enamel interchangeably as far as this is concerned. There is some nuance that's a little bit different. That people who know the chemistry of paints a lot better than I do will get into it. But generally, they're ones that are thinned with various forms of mineral spirits. The third one it's pronounced gouache. It's a French term, but basically it's a type of watercolor. And I've only just started experimenting with them, but as you'll see a little later on, Ralph Renzetti makes use of gouache paints. And the other one that I've come across, but I've not had a chance to try, are clay-based wash. And I'm going to get into each of these broadly in categories. So let's start. Before we get started, any questions? I may just kind of stop and go through, but we're gonna start with the ones that we're most familiar with, and that's acrylic-based washes. And so, really, this is a case of using paint or ink that are essentially they're water soluble. Is sort of the broad term that's here. I mean, I may not necessarily be accurate on the actual chemical terms. We've already talked about some of the different recipes that we've had there. The ink, the isopropyl alcohol, the ink, and the future floor polish. And as some have done it, basically it's a 50-50 mix of future and water, whether distilled water or otherwise, depending on how hard the water is where you are. And Sometimes they put just a tiny little bit of dish soap to break the water tension, so it kind of flows into the cracks well. And then also using paint or inks along with watered down matte medium, like uh, whether it's Mod Podge or different types of like golden acrylics matte medium, for example, you can use to create flat washes. Because one of the things, if you're using the Future, it's very shiny, and you're going to have to use some sort of matte coat over top of it. So, all right, Dustin. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you on the on the other side. I hope you enjoy I hope you enjoy the replay. If you feel so inclined, hit the like button before you leave, and we'll just kind of keep on going. All right. So with this, just if there's any questions, just post them, and I'll try and keep up with them, and we can work with this. But acrylic washes are often the most common. But really, when you use an acrylic wash, most of the time you're actually coating an entire surface rather than a more precise application. These are, or it's you're coating an entire surface or a section of a model. For example, when doing miniatures, for example, and you're doing skin tones and the like, acrylic washes are really quite good with that. And I actually have a little bit of an unveiling here. Is that one of the commissions that I have through my Patreon page is to do a Hiawatha Skytop color car in CN colors, and what I am, but part of that is to include passengers, and so I get to paint not all of these, but at least some of them for Cloverdale Rail, and so that's part of it. And one of the things that I'm going to be using is acrylic washes to handle a lot of the detail on these, and that may include some of the Army Painter washes that I have. But also some of the Games Workshop ones. Now, examples of some of the acrylic washes that we have. I can kind of put. Well, let's see. I just need to make sure my camera shows this, but. Some of the washes here. These are washes made by Vallejo. Now they're still in the package. These are pretty decent acrylic washes. I haven't. I don't like them as much as my old standbys. Let's see, where are we here? And we'll just put that there. They're referred to as shades from Citadel, from Games Workshop. Yes, you're going to see a lot of Citadel stuff from me regardless. But curiously enough, the very first washes that Games Workshop ever put out were nothing more than inks that you watered down, and they say, and you could modify that yourself. And as time went on, people were asking, well, what's the right ratio of water to ink to whatever other fluid that they have. So the Games Workshop started putting out washes, and then in their latest painting system, they refer to them as shades, but they are essentially washes. And these ones are designed to more or less come out of the bottle. You might want to thin them down just with a little bit of water, but you can apply them directly. And they have a lot of different colors with. A lot of different colors with that. Here's just a little pro tip. This is where I store my washes in. This is a cross stitch box. You can go to Michael's. You can buy these for like real cheap, and you can store any, like, it'll take Tamiya size paint bottles, as well as anything the Games Workshop and the AK Interactive Real Color line. So if you're looking for and Humbrol will fit in these ones too. Very good way to store a whole bunch of paints. So there's a little pro tip for the day. But generally, if I use acrylic paints a lot, especially if I'm doing a lot of complex surfaces and doing faces and the like, uh, the which oddly enough, when on rail cars and the like, I actually tend not to use acrylic washes too much, except often on trucks. I will use them most often on trucks and the like. So the sorry, just making sure that we have that. Okay, all right. Now, just a couple things that when you're working with acrylic washes, of course, with oils you generally want to work on a gloss surface. On with acrylic washes, generally a matte coat. Whether or not you apply a clear matte coat over it or apply directly over flat paint, it doesn't matter too much because these usually don't attack the paint underneath it. But if you want to be absolutely sure, probably just put a matte coat, whether it's dull coat or spray it on flat clear or something like that. But acrylic washes will simply beat up on a gloss surface, and and the other thing about for the most part with acrylic washes like this, uh, they will dry fairly quickly. But because of that, you got to be really careful about tide marks and pooling. Is that if because for the most part, when you apply acrylic washes, you're doing so usually with a brush. They can be airbrush. You can airbrush on them, but that's often for more of a kind of a smoky effect. But when you using it, you just take a brush and you more or less slobber it all over the model. And but you've got to be very careful to to wick away the extra wash that might be pooling towards the bottom of a model or something like that. So just when you apply it, you got to look at it, dry off the brush that you've applied it with, or take a brush that's dry and just stick it into where there is excess wash, just to wick it off the model, so you don't get like a big blob at the bottom, depending upon the consistency. So Highland Husky Mooch Squad, you have a novice question. Different types of washes on a brass C8, or sorry, a brass CB CNS Alco versus the plastic Alcos. For the most part, you can use by the time when you're working with brass models, like brass metal, it doesn't matter too much. Once you get that first layer of paint on it, for the most part, everything else above that will behave normally. Um, you might want to be a little careful about where it can go. But for the most part, the types of washes that you would use on a brass model are very similar, are pretty much the same as ones that you would use on a plastic model. But make sure you're obviously not using the wash directly on the brass. I mean, that probably goes without saying, but just making sure, because what matters is it's the paint surface that it's applying to, not necessarily the metal. Because if you get a good primer onto the brass, I mean, the one thing about working with brass, and this is something that I have limited experience with, is that getting a good primer that will actually stick to the brass. Because once you've got that paint layer on it, everything else should normally should go normally. So anyway, that's sort of my take on it. I hope that helps. So, all right, Vinny, the not not a problem. Thank you for being my moderator. Go enjoy supper. Um, my son's bedtime is actually about 4 minutes ago, but he's pretty quiet at the moment. My only deadline is I need to be done by 8 o'clock my time, which is about 25 minutes from now. So we'll be able to go with it. So any other questions at this point going forward? I mean, I'm just toss the questions out there because I want to be able to move through this. So Yeah, the one thing is when it comes to washes, practice. In fact, something that I'm going to show a little later on. Here's my little teaser. Is different things that you can practice on, and I've got a couple of examples just right down in front here. So anyway, oils and enamel washes. The weathering washes video that I did as part of my Weathering Basics series, that's kind of a summary of it. And if you've seen that video, that one really gets into oil and enamel washes. I will admit, oil-based washes until about 10 years ago, I didn't experience. I was afraid of them, not because I had tried and screwed up. I mean, I had just not tried because oil paints scared me. And then once I tried it, I was like convert overnight. There's things that you can do with oil-based washes that you can't do with acrylics, and so again, each of the types of washes that we're talking about today, each of them have a good, strong reason for using them, but not to the exclusion of the others, because there are different ways each one shines well. And so your basic oil based wash is simply oil paint and with a lot more thinner than you would normally use if you were painting with oils. Creates a wash. My favorite wash that is homemade is Starship Filth and just thin down, and it works beautifully. The color on it is really good. I plan you're going to see it in some of the commissions, especially on some of the red car and locomotive that we have. Starship Filth and the homemade wash I'm going to be using on that. And the nice thing about oil washes in particular, like I'll get to that, is that it's really good for getting into the really fine detail, like rivets, the panel lines. Like the Tamiya panel line is basically, it counts as an oil or enamel wash. And you can bring out definition in much tighter ways than you can with acrylics, and you can also selectively apply it without it looking funny, because you can blend it, and that's the main thing, is that you can apply it. It dries slowly, and then you can come back and just feather the edges with a paintbrush, and away you go. The last line, there. The last line there is using as a filter. A filter is actually a different type of wash, and I haven't had a chance to really go through that. But here's an example of a pre-made filter, and what filters do is, filters are basically oil washes that are even thinner than normal, and instead of you apply a filter to a matte surface rather than a gloss surface. Oil washes, especially ones that you're using for detail, you need to do over a gloss wash, but a filter, on the other hand, has a totally different approach, because what you're trying to do there is, instead of trying to draw out the detail, you're actually trying to blend, make the colors kind of flow together. If you've got several different colors there, it kind of gives a cohesiveness to it, and it can also tint the color. So anyway, that's probably all I'm going to say about filters right now, because really that's worth a whole video in and of itself. But it's a neat, it is certainly a neat way to go. So, John, you're asking about oil washes for mortar on bricks. Yes, I actually did it a couple weeks ago. Got some great results in it. When I did it, I did it on an N scale Atlas roundhouse, and I was really impressed as to how well it worked. Now, it was a slightly thicker wash. It was almost to the consistency of a slurry, but I did the gloss surface, and then I used actually a wide flat brush to paint over it, and it ran right into the where the mortar is to be, and then I let it sit for probably about maybe about 15 minutes. I probably should have only let it sit for about 10, and then I took a lint-free cloth and just wiped off the surface. Had to wet it a little bit, but it did a really nice mortar effect. And not only that, there's sort of an unevenness to it, and you can also go back and certainly feather that. So yes, John, great question, because yes, you can use it. I would do a gloss coat first because you really want it to flow right into the bricks. And then once it's in there and once it's dried, you can seal it, and then you can do whatever sort of dry brushing or powders or whatever you want on the surface of the brick. But initially, do the gloss so it can flow where it needs to go, and then you can do some other things later. So yeah. That was mine. That was my experience of it. So I do advocate for doing mortar, and I think the mix that I used was a soft mixing white. Hi, Georgia. Can everybody hear the cat? So with the soft mixing white, and I think it was a color called parchment, which is just really a very pale yellow, and that was my mortar color. But you can do this with almost any color with that. So everybody can hear the cat. There's Georgia, who really doesn't really have any idea what's going on. Okay, there we go. So, go-to wash techniques for representing oily or grimy streaks. Well, actually, oddly enough, Starship Filth, and that's more of a dot streaking technique. So it's not so much. I mean, you're using the same kind of material. My recent video on the Canadian covered hopper shows how I use Starship Filth to do these kind of grimy streaks and panel lines and extra grime. I used it three different ways, and it just, some of it was thin, some of it was applied thickly. But usually, if doing a streak, I take an oil that is more or less at full strength, dab it on the model, let it dry a little bit, and then take a dry brush and streak it down to get that kind of vertical streaking. Hi, Bill. Welcome. Glad everybody's able to drop in. One of the things that I also sort of remembered partway into this is to actually record this, so I may be able to do some splice edits and release this as a complete video a little later on that might actually have some examples kind of cut in alongside it. So anyway, there's another one there. Now here's a couple things to just. If you're taking notes, things you need to know about oil enamel washes. Of course, they have a long drying time, and that is to their advantage, but it's also a disadvantage because you do have to really let it wait. For those of you who were following the Down and Dirty weathering contest, Joe G was using oils for the first time, and you realized exactly how long you had to wait between using oil paints. Oh, we have two Bills. Hi, Bill. The Bill Murray and Bill Bossman. Welcome. And so anyway, the long drying time is one of the advantages to oils, but it's also a disadvantage is because it'll slow down your workflow. If you're trying to do a lot of things really quickly, I wouldn't say you can't do it with oils, but you got to be a little more patient. The other thing is when you're doing oil-based washes is you have to do some degree of what's called stumping or softening the wash after it partially dries, and otherwise you're going to get these kind of tide marks. But that's actually to the advantage of using an oil wash is that you can do this because you can blend it really nicely. Whereas with an acrylic, if it dries with that tide line, you're stuck with it. And that can be, and that's one of the reasons why acrylics are really good for like small figures, small surfaces. They're great for wood textures and things like that. But for large surfaces and detail, the oil-based washes really do shine because they can get right just these really thin thin lines to create that illusion of volume, and that doesn't matter the scale. And it, oil washes do scale really well, and it's part of it. And also, I've mentioned before, when you're using an oil wash, gloss. You start with you really want to use a gloss coat. More and if you're doing, for example, a dot fade technique, you do it over satin. But when you're using oils, for the most part, you want to be doing it over a gloss, because you really want it to flow where it needs to go. Whereas if you do that with an acrylic, it'll just simply bead up because of the thick water tension. But the advantage of using oil paints or oil paints and thinners is that because the surface tension is so low, it just flows right into those cracks very, 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 very nicely. So yes, check out if you haven't already. I usually say this in all my videos. If you haven't already, check out my Weathering Basics playlist, and it has a list of some of those techniques in there. But I'm trying to broaden that for this discussion. So now we get into an area that is actually new for me, and what I wanted to talk about was something called gouache paints. And yes, my daughter had to teach me how to pronounce that properly. Both my wife and daughter are fluently bilingual in English and French, and mine is more your typical Western Canadian. I'm not so good at this, and so you don't want to hear what I was originally pronouncing it as. So I'll just I'll leave it at that. But the gouache paints are basically the watercolor paints that come in a tube, and you can find them in any art store. Some of them will actually say gouache right on it, like this one does, and but they have the proper. They are effectively watercolors, and so they've got all the qualities of it that. Chemically, they're thinnable by water, but they have different chemical properties to them than acrylic paints. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I'm not. Again, I'd rather consult with a chemical engineer who can actually hopefully explain it a little bit better than I have. But the really neat thing about them is that after gouache paints dry, you can come back and reconstitute them with a bit of water. In the same way that, if you get a watercolor tray, that's actually how they work. Is you apply the water and it constitutes the paint, and then you apply it. Same thing here is if it's on the surface, you can actually take water and it'll effectively re-wet the paint, as long as it's not sealed in. So you can come back and rework them. So there's a lot of potential for these even after they've dried. And in fact, this comes to my little experiments. I'm going to be doing a video at some point on test cards, but it's more like test forks, or test spoons, or test knives. You might have, if you're either on the Patreon page or on my Facebook page, you might have seen a picture of the knives where I was testing out different types of airbrush fading for a couple of the models of a couple of the commissions that I have coming up. But anyway, I just did this. You can kind of see this on the back of the fork here. Is I primed this fork white, and I applied a thin down wash of the gouache of black gouache, and I was able to let it let's see, how close can we get there? Can everybody see this okay? No problem, Flora. As a matter of fact, I even did a red fork in honor of the your locomotive that I'm going to be doing test washes on. But again, from here up, I've got white primer on there, and I just applied the black gouache thin down to create this wash, and then I was able to come back and blend it a few minutes later. And then today, a full day later, I went back with a wet brush and was able to blend it further. And so there's some real potential here. I haven't fully explored this, but there is something about this. Recently, there was a video. I think it's on HO Scale Customs. Recently posted a video on using watercolor pencils for doing streaks and the like. I've used watercolor pencils differently, but that video is definitely worth checking out. And AK Interactive has recently announced that there's going to be weathering pencils coming out, and I've sent them a letter and kind of going, I'd like to see those. I'd like to review them on the channel, and that might. But haven't heard anything back from them yet. But so there are some, like, moving in using watercolors in various capacities, whether in the trays or as the gouache paints in the tube. There's certainly a lot of potential for it, and so. As I've been able to figure out so far, you can use them as pin or general washes. You can use these for grime accumulation. You can use them for dust streaking. Like, you could actually do a sort of a general wash over a surface, and then take a wet brush and take a wet brush and paint down, and you get that kind of dust streaking where the dust is largely on the car, but there's sort of water streaks through it. That's one possibility. Can be used as filters as well. Now, I thought I had actually... There we are. I wanted to make sure that Ralph Renzetti gets proper credit for this, because he's been using gouache paints for a long time. And all hail the Mudfather, that make sure that... that he gets appropriate credit, because he was on a weathering forum that discovered that you can actually mix gouache paints and water mixable oils and do some really neat weathering things. He did a series on from Workbench to Mainline, I think is the name of the series, on YouTube Model Builders. If you guys haven't seen it, I mean, they're long videos, but they're definitely worth watching. And so Ralph, of course, using them with water mixable oils. I've not done that yet. I want to give that a try. But certainly as a wash, gouache paints do work really well. But similar to oils, they do need a little bit of massaging after you've applied them and let them dry. But the fortunate thing is that you can do it. And if you're afraid of oils, or afraid isn't the right word, but if oils kind of concern you, then this might be a good step. I want to try them for streaking and the like as well. But they're definitely something to add to the arsenal. Now, the next thing, I need to make a full disclaimer about clay-based washes. How many of you have ever heard of clay-based washes? I'm just going to throw that out there, because until a few weeks, about 3 or 4 months ago, I knew nothing about them, and I still don't have them. I've not tried them, but there are 2 companies out of the United Kingdom that manufacture them, and I'm not even sure what they're necessarily made of. Aside from the fact that they call them clay-based washes, so the pigment material inside them must be clay-based, and there's some things on clay paints, but I'm still learning about them. But there's a couple videos out there that really show some potentials for this, but they're not widely available in North America.
Dad, I want to talk to Pete.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what you're asking. Do you want to say hi to everybody? Okay, you need to come around here so they can see you. My son wants to make an appearance. Oh. Wave hi to everybody. There we go. My little I have, both of my children are budding artists, and they in fact, my daughter is quite skilled. She's the one who kind of got me up to speed on how gouache paints work. Of course, Ian has been delving into all kinds of paints at his age as well.
Hi, I've heard my cue.
There's yeah. And,
Hello.
and there we go. So everybody's waving. So there we are. Thank you for sharing on how gouache paints work.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, as far as
You're lucky I don't have my spit valve with you or with me.
no, I don't see the trombone, and not in a hurry.
It's upstairs.
Good.
I can go get it if you guys want.
And the family intervenes. Now, well, somebody was asking about it, but anyway, so anyway, just going back to it, like there we are. So Highland Husky Mooch Squad Hero. Okay. Do you know which hobby store in Ontario has them? Because I mean, if I can order them, I really want to give these things a try, because they can be slobbered on with a brush. Like the way they work is they work on an application and removal system similar to oils, but it's much more general. That you airbrush them on, or you you use a brush and apply them heavily, let them dry for a little bit, and then use rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip to brush them off. And what it does two things. It leaves kind of this streaky texture on the model, and I believe they're done over a gloss coat. And but it also runs right into the cracks and works really well as a type of pin wash. So the now what I would the Highland Husky. The trouble is, if you try and post the link in the chat, it'll potentially block you from doing so, and I don't think I've got a moderator here to make it public. My suggestion is post the link down below. It'll hide it briefly. I'll make it public once you find it. So if people are interested in getting clay-based washes, I mean, I'm curious to see if you can get them through Amazon and the like, but I've not been able to find them. But what I wanted to, I've already described sort of how they're used, but I guess I'm wrong in terms of they're available in the UK only. I've only been able to find them with that, but sounds like that there are places that do source them, and the two main companies are Ultimate Modeling Products, or it's called and the other one is Flory Models, Flory, and and they've got some really interesting applications that I'm very curious to give a try. Military modelers tend to use these. They're certainly not as well known. But those people that I've seen in terms of some of the videos really swear by them more than any other type of wash. Although I'm very much an advocate of using the best tool for the best for whatever. So my experimenting with gouache paints, for example, won't replace use of either acrylic or oil-based washes, and I don't expect that if encountering clay-based washes that it would completely replace that. The idea is use the best tool for the job. So anyway, the last, and actually that segues into my last point, is that when it comes to using washes, the real thing is what sort of effect are you trying to achieve? Or what sort of surface are you working on? If you're working on miniatures like little figures, acrylic paints tend to work much better on them, unless you're doing a larger scale, like a 1/12 or something like that. But usually in model railroading, you're dealing with either HO or N scale, and that's where acrylic washes really will do you well. They're also good for pulling out some of the details on trucks. So that's certainly one. That's certainly another option there. But again, it's best tool for the job. Oh, and there goes the phone. So I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but here in Alberta we have an election going on, and we have pollsters calling all the time. So so anyway, the phones are the phones are ringing. So with that, I just I'm going to bring this back over to the live chat. And so Mike, thank you. Yes, I did get the I did get the picture of the 100-line washes. Thank you. It just my phone just buzzed, and I got a little notification. So yes, it did arrive. So oh yeah, in terms of all sorts of so David, yes, in terms of all the different polling and phone calls that we get, the phone just rings off the hook, and it doesn't matter whether you have a landline or if you have a cell phone. It's pretty much the same. So the with that, I wanted to just do a couple things. Before we go, I got this box. Florent was in earlier, and he had to check out. But this is a little unboxing I wanted to do, and I'm hoping that I can I can do this without destroying the box. So, all right. So we're just gonna open this up. There we go.
Dad, I want to do a firefighter one, but I can't find
You can't
one.
find a firefighter one, bud.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have to wait a little bit. All right. So, all right. So. I don't actually, I'm not quite able to show, hey, it's bubble wrap. Lots of bubble wrap. And more bubble wrap. So, so these are both Intermountain SD40-2 locomotives. And we have a Union Pacific. Oh, we've got. Sorry, I've got it. There's a lot of reflection on the monitor. There we go. Okay, so they're a Union Pacific N scale locomotive. And now, if you may recall, Flora was the one who actually won the main prize on my my 1K giveaway. And I guess, considering I haven't actually done anything for him, I now have three locomotives from him, as part of and he's one of my in the commission tiers on my Patreon page, but he sent me two locomotives. This Southern Pacific locomotive is going to get a Union Pacific patch and lots of rust, and so I'm looking forward to getting into these. But they have arrived. One of the reasons why I put the link down here, not so much my Patreon page isn't necessarily a way for me to make money. It's really a chance, if you want to have a chance to participate in the creative content of what I have on the channel. It's a way for you to participate in that, and you can also go there and you can actually follow the page without becoming a patron. So that's one way if you want to kind of keep up on on stuff that I'm working on. For updates and the like. I try to do it to the Facebook pages as well, but that's a way to do it. If you happen to be a patron, you get some of the behind the scenes stuff. But if you commission me on something, you automatically get all the benefits of being a patron. But anyway, there's my plug. All right, let's kind of get. Let's get back to this. Back to our live chat. Yeah, well, I really haven't done too much in the way of unboxing, but anyway, the of course, unless if you have any more questions in terms of washes, I can linger on for just about maybe about 5 more minutes before officially wrapping up. But appreciate everybody showing up and participating in this. Washes are always a good thing because really, when it comes to weathering or modeling, they really are a very important tool in your toolbox. And there's all kinds of different ways to do it. I think there's no one wash that's better than the other. Although, because even a basic acrylic paint, like a craft paint acrylic wash, has its use. If you use it in the right circumstance. If you now that having so.
Dad, I want that kind of Lego. Dad, I want this
Okay.
kind of Lego.
Ian.
I want that kind of
Okay,
Lego.
duly noted.
I want that kind of Lego.
My son loves Lego, absolutely loves it, and he just goes berserk when he sees something he likes. Okay, so David Howard can't find future floor polish anywhere. Would pledge floor polish do? I'm actually assuming it's the same stuff. So it used to be a different brand, and then Pledge basically stuck their own label on it. So generally, you may notice that this actually says Pledge on it. So if it's Pledge Floor Care, sometimes this is more of a transitional label that it still had the Future brand on it. But as long as it's made by Johnson and what you want to do is look on the small label, and if it says acrylic protection on it, then it's the same stuff. Pay attention to John Howard, because I have found that I have a few people from various countries in Europe, and each of the countries have it's the same stuff, but it's a different label. So what it's labeled in Germany is different from Switzerland, is different from France, is different from the UK, and so making sure to say, hey, use this stuff. And the trouble is, where do we get it? Well, it is available. It's made by SC Johnson and Wax, and if basically it's clear acrylic, and that's one of the reasons why it works so well, is because it is clear acrylic. That's its real property. So all right. So we have a question from David. Do we have any other questions coming up? Realizing that we're about 7 minutes over the hour mark, and my son has 7:30 was his bedtime, and that was 37 minutes ago. So I probably should try and get him to bed. Yes, Bill. One of the things, Pure Future works really well under. You're gonna okay. I'm gonna say it. Decals. It works really well under decals or decals. And so I hope everybody. I really hope that you got the most out of this. I'm always open for questions, because I kind of view my role in this is that, yes, I have experience in doing weathering, but there are people out there who are much better than I am. And really, it's just trying to give an insight on to demystify some of that, to try it yourself. I certainly enjoy doing weathering, and when I'm kind of stalled on my layout, I've got I can certainly do cars and locomotives and the like as well. So yes, and the fortunate thing is on the replay that everybody can tune in. So anyway, with that, I believe I'm going to just kind of wrap things up. I'm just gonna I'm just going to do my little logo and go back
I
to.
want this Lego.
I heard you the first
Daddy
time.
want this Lego.
I heard you the
See?
first time, bud.
Dad, see this Lego?
Yes, I see it.
See this Lego I want?
Yep.
It turns into different kind of things.
Not a problem. And of course, an info pack stream complete with exclamations from my son. So with that, thank you very much, and good luck, and may you keep on track.